pretty good showing right now in our meeting here. So why don't we get started? And just a quick thank you to everybody for joining our update today. And should be able to see my screen. If you can't, let me know. But here's a quick overview of the agenda. Dorian, I don't know, do you have any opening remarks that you'd like to share with the...
Sure, I don't have any words of wisdom because I don't do wisdom. So I'll just cut to the chase and welcome everybody. We've got a great turnout. I would encourage everybody to note that these presentations are in segments. Each segment will have a period of time to actually engage in question and answers. So this doesn't become like one huge block of, us talking to you. We would obviously prefer the interactions and we expect them. Certainly, there's been an immense amount of progress. I think the program is unquestionably proceeding apace. I will just say parenthetically that Peter Scully, who could not unfortunately be here today because he had very important family obligations, Peter and I were on an interaction with the Liquid Waste Board of the Labor Department yesterday, which features Tom Gallagher, Steve Macchio, and Dick Crescenzo. And it was a very worthwhile and useful exchange. And if today's exchange goes the same way, there'll be a lot of really productive information. And we're looking forward to it. And I'll hand it back to Ken to get started.
Thank you, Dorian. And yeah, again, thanks everybody for joining. We got a great turnout here. This is just another update on our continued efforts to always review our program, optimize our program, and at the end of the day, we want to hear from you. We want to hear from the industry and what's working, what's not working. And while we've made significant progress, we have over 2,000 systems in the ground already. The goal is to get upwards of 380,000 systems in the ground. So again, we're always looking to optimize our program, and that's the goal of today, to have a constructive discussion. Our primary focus, we're going to recap what we discussed last time very briefly. Our primary focus today is to talk about pressurized shallow drain fields. So we're going to, Matt and I will tag team that and talk about some observations and recommendations. And this is really where we want some feedback. And then Jennifer Fries is going to give an update on IA system performance and permitting trends in general, and some other ideas that we're talking about to optimize our standards for IA systems. Julia will jump in with a septic improvement program update, and then Dorian and I will wrap it up at the end. Just a reminder to those folks that are interested in getting training credits towards your license, feel free. This is how you can get the credits. There will be 2 credits approved for participants that have joined this meeting today. And in order to receive your certificate, just email the septic demo email address here. This meeting is being recorded, and similar to the past, will be posted on our Reclaim Rewarded website if you want to go back and review it, and/or if you know of folks that couldn't participate today. So communication is key. It's been key throughout the program. This is just a slide that we presented last time showing for the various aspects of our program, who the primary contact is, as well as a phone number and email address. So for our septic improvement program, our SHIP portal and our SHIP process, as well as any related IA residential applications for the Office of Wastewater Management. And again, we always want feedback. So at any time, you can also go to the Reclaim Our Water website and any of these email addresses and give us feedback. So I think Julie is going to do a quick summary of, the biggest things that we talked about at the last meeting. We talked a lot about various aspects at the last meeting, but we just wanted to highlight some of the main things that we talked about.
All right, yes, thanks again, Ken. As Ken had just mentioned, on the reclaimeourwater.info website, we do have that recording from the November 17th meeting highlighted here on the screen, circled in red. That's on the homepage. And the major topics that we discussed in regard to the septic improvement program, the current statistics, as we usually do share, the recent revisions to the rules and regulations for that Garner SIP, and the SOQ, solicitation of quotes, that was being advertised in November of 2021. On the IA side, we gave an update on how permit trends are coming through the Suffolk County Department of Health Services for those IA systems, both applications and permit issuance, and we'll do the same today, as well as the update we had for one technology back then in general use approval. We have two technologies now in general use approval that we'll share information on with you today. And lastly, the Article 19 standard revisions, specifically reaching out to the stakeholders group on comments on the operation and maintenance and registration requirements and our plans to move forward with those, and our quality control sampling plan. And so just a reminder, those revised SIP rules and regulations were to prioritize grant issuance for public health and safety concerns. In order to do that, we modified the grant application scoring and added definitions of catastrophic and non-catastrophic failure. And so catastrophic failures are now a score of 100. Those get immediate grant issuance, and then all systems that are considered non-catastrophic failure receive a score of 90. Both of those do require proof of that failure. And we've been issuing grants in accordance with those revised scoring since fall of 2021. We also updated the priority area maps to include the more recent subwatersheds wastewater plan mapping, which is more current for the surface water areas, but also added in a large area towards the priority areas that is considered a priority for drinking water protection. These revised rules and regulations are intended to expedite grant issuance for homeowners with failing and failed sanitary systems, and to establish priority areas for the protection of drinking water. These revisions are in effect, and the website is actually, the website was currently under revision back at that November 17th meeting, but now the website has been updated. The online application was updated to reflect that. The last thing that we did go over on the SIP side was the SOQ. Back in November, we advertised the fixed pricing for the 2022 SOQ list. To date, we received 23 submissions for that new list. We did see increases in prices for tanks, leaching products, as well as labor costs. Here's just a simple comparison of the average cost for each type of unit in 2021 based on their SOQ submissions versus the 2022 SOQ submissions. And so you can see there is an increase in pricing. As we all know, we've been seeing that wherever we go shopping or where we have to spend money, and our SOQs do reflect that. And so that's been implemented since the beginning of the new year of 2022. The full list of 4-bedroom, 5-bedroom, 6-bedroom size costs are available on the reclaimeourwater.info/septic improvement program website. And just wanted to mention that these numbers that you're looking on the screen are based on a 4-bedroom IA unit with new gravity leaching pools, base installation costs, and abandoning the existing system. So what we consider scenario 2 on our website. So that's what we saw, and we'll go over more later on in the presentation about what we're seeing now. Lastly, O&M contracts and registrations. This is what we discussed last time, to revise Article 19 standards to minimize homeowner responsibility, to require the O&M provider to submit a copy of an annual O&M contract to the department, set minimum requirements for O&M contracts, including but not limited to a copy of the homeowner registration form as like an attachment, signatures of both the homeowner and the O&M provider together, and the O&M coverage period explicitly written out as a start date and an end date. And so that's what we proposed back then, and it's still the proposal right now on the table, as we didn't receive any feedback that would reflect a need to change this. The proposed approach, oh, sorry. I don't know if we can cover that. And lastly, Acela Citizens Portal for IA systems. I'm actually just going to hand this over to Jen real quick to go over our update on where we are with our portal as we've been working to get this launched for you, the public, the stakeholders for use.
Yeah, so thank you, Julia. So this is going to be what we're ultimately using in order to implement that service providers will be the ones responsible for handing us over O&M contracts and inclusive of registrations from their clients. So this is currently in development now and testing. We have a contractor involved with creating this, so it'll be expanding our current database, which is used for wastewater management permits, to also be the portal that's going to be accessed for all service providers to submit O&M contracts, inclusive of registrations, as they renew and get new people on board with their companies. We expect to go live for this project is September of 2022, so pretty soon. We do have a lot of it in our lower environments that we're working on right now. This will be the hub for reporting of all IA activities by maintenance providers servicing the systems. So this will include new and updated O&M contracts, service reports, and sample results for systems. Automated emails will be sent out to property owners and contracted maintenance providers prior to and at the time of an O&M contract expiration. So we'll be telling the residents, hey, your service contract is due in 30 days, 60 days. Your contract's due now, to let them know that the county is aware and watching and looking for those contracts to be maintained. Also, when annual service is due, Article 19 requirements require that every system be serviced at least annually. Most are serviced biannually or twice a year. We'll be looking for a service report to be submitted every time service is done on the system through this database. And also you'll be getting emails upon completed registration, so saying that you submitted an O&M contract and registration, and that we've seen it, have accepted it, and that system should be good for until the expiration date of that O&M contract. We're also working on an enforcement database through this Acela in the back office as well. So when we are not seeing compliance, we will be moving forward with enforcement actions to try to get people to make sure that they're following up on their O&M requirements. You can look for industry training that we will be doing coming up in fall of 2022, and implementation of this new system as a means of reporting to us.
So before you move on, are there any questions on that, on Acela in particular, or any others relating to what was just presented? Don't be shy.
Yeah, you have on there that it's an annual contract, but currently the contracts are 3 years. So is that going to change from 3-year contract to an annual contract?
Yeah, so in the database, contracts can be really any length of time, right? So that's dependent on what the business wants to make as a contract and what the person is willing to pay. So you can do yearly, every 3 years, every 5 years. There will be a place on here to say this is the start date and this is how long it's going to last and this is when it's expired.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
No problem.
Any other questions on some of the recap material from last meeting? All right. So that being said, we're going to move on to a discussion on pressurized shallow drain fields, some evaluations that we've done, some updates that we've done to our SHIP process for approvals of PSDs, as well as some things that we're considering, again, all in an effort to optimize our program. And again, don't be shy with this. One of the main objectives of this meeting is to hear from you and real world experience, real world field experience, any concerns. And I'll just share that other than some of the things for SHIP that have already been implemented, the other slides that we present for concepts for changes to the standards to optimize the program, those are concepts right now. Nothing set in stone. And again, this is really to facilitate and encourage discussion on how we can best optimize the implementation of PSDs. So to start out, we have a few slides on some background on PSD statistics, the standards, the approval process. So Matt Gravina from our Office of Wastewater Management is going to run through some of these slides. Matt, I'll control the slide deck. Just let me know when you want me to shift to the next slide.
All right, sounds good. So yeah, my name's Matthew Gravina. I'm a senior sanitarian in the Office of Wastewater Management. I supervise a lot of the work that comes in through the septic hauler information portal and a lot of grant applications on the residential side, the plan review, inspections of those. So on this slide, you can see these are kind of the two most common trench leaching products we see in Suffolk County. You got the Geomat 3900 and the infiltrator chambers, the quick fours. You can see the Geomats are a little bit more popular, about 200. And you can see here, they also have the breakdown of the amount of pressurized ones versus gravity and the installation through ship or the full application process. You can see pressurized is a bit more common. It reduces the footprint a bit, and it's about an even breakdown between full application installations and ship installations. Next slide, please. So if you're going to do a pressurized shallow drain field, these are the three major ways that you go through it. The first would be a full Office of Wastewater Management permit with a bedroom count. That is the kind of approval that you've been used to doing for years. It's, they're doing an addition, they're building a pool house, anything that another agency is requiring our approval. You're going to come in with an application plan, floor plans, you're going to have site plans. They have to be designed by an architect or engineer. We're going to be doing, inspections of the entire system, including the PSD. We're checking soil on them. And yeah, as always, after it goes in, we need to inspect the entire system. The second, if you fill out a full application, you also can apply for a best fit approval. So this is, it's really like a best fit sanitary upgrade only approval. This is if you are not doing any work on the property, not trying to legalize any previously done work, and you're just trying to upgrade the sanitary system, make the site better than it was. So just to be clear, we come into it sometimes. If you need a bedroom count from another agency, if the permit is something that, you need to have that bedroom count on there, even if it's the best thing that could fit on the site, it wouldn't be what we call a best fit permit. It's really a best fit sanitary upgrade only. So you don't need the approval for anything. You're just strictly doing a sanitary upgrade. And since you're doing a PSD, you need to have an IA. And since you're doing an IA, you need to do an application with us. And unless you go through SHIP, which I'll talk about in a second. So same deal, needs to have site plans, stamped by an architect or engineer. We do all the same inspections that we normally would. It's just we have a little more wiggle room with some of those setbacks that are required in the standards, what we can approve versus what you can fit on site and what code requires. It just gives a little more flexibility. And then the third option is the septic hauler information portal. And that is used if you have proof of some kind of failure on the site. It's right now it's got to be a caved in sanitary structure on the site or a block pool on site. And if you give us proof of that, you can go in through the septic hauler information portal. You still need to have an architect or engineer involved, but they don't need to do full site plans. They're going to do a site consult, meet us on site. You're going to come up with a sketch on it, and then the architect or engineer is going to sign off on the sketch, and then they're going to sign off on the system after it goes in using our design professional certification form. Next slide, please. So these are the current standards we use when approving a pressurized shallow drain field. So we do the 13-inch max depth from grade, architect engineer approval, intermittent dosing on the pump. We recommend you put it in native soil, and you need either perk tests or soil boring to design it based on that. And all these other parts on the bottom here are a lot of calculations that need to be shown on the plan. But the ones in red here are ones that we're kind of looking at as possible changes. You could see on the right, this is the current chart we use based on the percolation rate or the soil in the area, what kind of application rate you can use based on the category of IA OWTS. So for these, you're either connecting to a 4-foot layer of SPSW sand, or you're doing 2 perk tests to kind of design it based on that. Next slide, please.
All right, so Matt, I think this is where I'm jumping in here. So that gives some context on kind of how we've been doing things with PSDs, the different approval processes, obviously the standards that guide those processes for approval. And so as we've been moving along here, in the last few months, we wanted to take a hard look at everything that we do. Majority of pressurized shallow drain fields in Suffolk County are working well as designed. However, we've been notified by some industry professionals of some failed PSDs, and we're just starting to investigate the causes of those failures, and then starting to think about now, while we're still relatively young into the program, again, with the goal of eventually installing up to 380,000 wastewater upgrades throughout the county, replacing these on-site disposal systems, want to take a look at it now to understand, okay, why did some of these systems fail, and what can we do better moving forward to optimize their design, installation, and performance. And that goes in terms of those 3 aspects, as well as operation and maintenance. That we'll probably talk about operation and maintenance more so during the next meeting. But some of the things that we've seen so far is roughly 16 failures of the GeoMat 3900. 13 of those, it's pointed here, were installed through the SHIP process, so the expedited self-certification process. 3 through the full permit. We have had at least 1 known failure of an infiltrator, a couple of drip irrigation systems that were installed under our demo program had failures. And then we've heard some anecdotal information from some of the industry, but nothing hard on, potentially some IA effluent pumps are failing, and those particular systems happen to be connected to a PSD. So not confirmed, but potentially there's concern that some of the pumps were failing due to the PSD clogging, but those weren't confirmed. So again, today we really want to hear from the industry if on what's working, what's not working. If folks aren't comfortable, I'll just say this, sharing information in this environment, always feel free to email Jen, Julia, Matt, or myself at any time with anything, any follow-up. Oops. So just wanted everybody to know that, department is currently working with the installers and manufacturers to evaluate failure mechanisms. We're continuing to coordinate with proximal jurisdictions that have been using these systems for decades. And I mentioned before, it's, most of them are working just fine, but now is the time to optimize things, hopefully before we advance up to starting to ramp up towards the replacement of these 380,000 systems in the future. So here's some of the things that we've done so far, kind of in response to this initial outreach that was made to us. The health department's made outreach to individual PSD manufacturers, as well as regulatory officials and technical experts in proximal jurisdictions, again, that have been using these systems for a long time. Cape Cod, Rhode Island includes both some of the jurisdictions in Rhode Island, as well as folks from the University of Rhode Island. We revised our ship process requirements for PSDs. As I mentioned before, a significant portion of the failures occurred under ship. Matt's going to talk about that in a minute. And then I'm going to jump into, after Matt discusses some of the ship process revisions, I'm going to jump into some ideas that we had based on input that we received from the PSD manufacturers, technical experts, and regulatory officials in our proximal jurisdictions. I'll talk about some of these possible standard revisions. And again, this is also where we want to get feedback, initial feedback here from the industry into terms of some of these options that we'll take into consideration before our next meeting, where we come to some conclusions. All right, so Matt, I'm going to pass this back to you for the next couple of slides, just on a revision to the ship process.
Okay. Yep. So this was the memo we sent out to all liquid waste contractors in Suffolk County and a lot of the engineers, architects that we regularly work with. Next slide, please. So this is kind of the big change for our ship process. Preliminary plan sketch provided to Office of Wastewater Management must include percolation test for soil burning unless native soils are confirmed SB/SW down to 4 feet below land surface. Include the hydraulic loading rate and depict the minimum required PSD length based upon loading calculations must be signed by licensed design professional. So that's so yeah, basically for all these sites now, we're going to need to have a test hole for all the PSDs that are going in through ship. You're going to have at least a shallow test hole, like 4 or 5 feet. And if you have SPSW, you either need to tell us that you're going to excavate down to it, or if you don't plan on doing that, or you don't have SPSW soil that you can connect to, you need to put those perk tests on the plan that you're submitting to us for ship approval. And you need to show us the actual calculations of how you're designing the sanitary system. So you got to be giving us the application rate, the flow rate of the house, doing all the math that come out to the required length of it. And that has to be signed by the design professional. The other big change is now we're going to be inspecting the PSDs that go in through ship before they're backfilled. It's we're, like Ken said, we're looking for feedback, and we're willing to hear what's working, what's not, and change things up. But right now we're just going to be focusing on the PSD itself. So we're not going to be inspecting the the rest of the septic system. We're just making sure that the field matches the plan, soil looks good, everything looks level. And then there are certain best fit scenarios that we're going to ask for a little bit extra on the design of it. So if you're doing a best fit because you cannot fit in the required system size, based on our standards, it's just a tight lot, something like that. Or if you have high groundwater and you can't maintain that, 3 to 2 foot setback that we usually look for, then we're going to ask that you over excavate the trenches 4 feet down and replace that with SPSW sand to kind of give a little extra cushion to the sanitary design, hopefully make it last a little bit longer. Next slide, please. Okay, yep, and that is what I just said. So that is what we're talking about, best fit. We're talking about not meeting the minimum size or some kind of issue with setback to groundwater. So if we let some stuff go through ship that we wouldn't normally approve on a regular application, maybe you're 4 feet to the property line instead of 5 feet, something like that. That shouldn't trigger this requirement to do SPSW soil, extra 4 feet underneath it. This is just in cases where you have kind of like an undersized leaching area. All right, next slide.
So Matt, I'll jump in here again and kind of talk about, so that's some of the stuff that we've that we've done so far. And by the way, if anybody on this call or this meeting has not received that memo, feel free again to reach out to email Matt or myself, and we'd be happy to email you a copy of that memo if you have not received it. So now I just want to talk about some possible revisions to the residential standards. Again, I would love to hear some input afterwards in terms of concerns or suggestions or other suggestions or, you know, different options. One of the things that we're going to, this is kind of low-hanging fruit, put directly into our standards solely to make it explicit in our standards is basically what Matt just said. This is something that we put in the SHIP, the revised SHIP guidance memo in terms of the requirements for best fit and kind of what's required in terms of excavating down to SPSW and how the system should be designed in terms of loading rate. That's an easy one. But other things that we've heard from some of these proximal jurisdictions and some of the experts, and these are again just ideas, I'd say the top four that seemed in our minds that potentially have the biggest impact would be revising our hydraulic loading rates, our design rates, considering systems to be time dosed versus what we're doing right now is demand dosed, and I'll explain that in a minute. Ensuring that the PSD base material and final grade cover materials level, that was pointed out by several folks as being you know, very important to PSDs in terms of ensuring that there isn't preferential flow at the base of the PSD. Consider requiring there to be a sand bed or base layer for all PSDs as opposed to just putting on native soil. And then other things to also just consider requiring root barriers under certain conditions. Consider using something like the USC soil classification system as opposed to the borings that we're using now or the percolation tests to establish design loading rates. This was just something actually that came out of Rhode Island, one of their suggestions. Consider limiting installation depths to 12 inches or 18 inches max versus the current allowance of I think it's 30 inches. So first one that I wanted to just discuss quickly was loading rates and kind of what we're doing right now and what some possible options are. Again, these options were just created just to facilitate any kind of discussion or questions or comments. But on the right side here, you can kind of see what our county standards are right now for loading rates. We have category 1 loading rates, which are the highest loading rates for category 1 IA systems. These systems treat BOD and TSS down to a certain level, would have the cleanest effluent, therefore would allow the highest loading rate for the PSD because it would protect the PSD. Then we have category 2 IA systems, a little less on the effluent quality, but still provide some level of protection over, say, a conventional system in terms of the effluent quality, so lower loading rates than category 1 or 2. And then for comparison, we wanted to just show a table of, now New York State has a bunch in there, Part 70, Part 75A regulations in there. Their designer's manual. They have a bunch of different types of absorption trenches, absorption beds, different types of systems. Probably the one that's closest in terms of loading rates for the purposes of this discussion to our PSD trenches is probably going to be what they refer to as absorption trenches. And this gives you some perspective on, for certain percolation rates, what their allowable application rates are. You can just very quickly see that they're generally lower than the county's category 1 or category 2 hydraulic loading rates. So, you know, a few different options here. No change to the approved rates as is. Option 2, we take out category 1 loading rates, the highest category 1. and just use category 2 loading rates. And that would somewhat take the IA performance on the effluent quality out of the equation for provide a little bit of a factor of safety in terms of the effluent quality going to the PSD itself. And then option 3, default to New York State's Part 75A loading rates is another option. And I'm going to pause for a moment. I know I've been discussing a lot, but just want to see if there's any comments on this particular spot right here, or any other thoughts or options that pop into anybody's head in terms of just loading rates. If there's any design professionals or installers on a call that just have any observations, be interested to hear anything.
Yeah, hey Ken, Tom O'Dwyer here. Another option or additional feature I would consider is effluent filters being required prior to the PSD systems. That can be done in the pump basin or prior to the pump basin. That would keep solids out of the PSD field if the IA was to fail or have some kind of short-term malfunction. And that might add an added layer of protection to the PSD system drain field. I'm not sure if that would make a big difference, but that's something we've implemented on a lot of projects. And let me also just note the New York State loading rates for absorption trenches.
Yeah.
Those don't have any kind of factor of safety, a beneficial factor for IA systems built into them. So
Right.
they seem like they're much more conservative, which, might be good, but the IA effluent is supposed to be a much higher quality effluent than conventional. So I don't know in reality if that's always the fact, but that's, I think, why the discrepancy is so much different.
Definitely. Awesome comments, Tom. And I will say this too, this whole program is being implemented adaptively, right? So whatever we do moving forward here, we can always start one place, make a change, evaluate the performance, and then adapt and modify if we need to as we move forward. So that's one thing with a program that's this big, that's really important to do, is just be adaptive and always adapt and pivot based on the new information and data that we get. So I'll just throw that out there as well. But good ideas, Tom. Anyone else?
I have a question. This is Adriana with Direct Drainage. This is only for pressurized systems. These rules are not for gravity.
So the PSDs are our main focus right now, and this is just based on the initial input that we've had from the industry. But it's a good question, Adriana. We could definitely consider it in the context of the gravity systems, but right now this is for PSDs only.
Okay, I just wanted to confirm that.
Ken, I just wanted to add one more thing. It's Tom again.
Sure.
Is one thing I noticed in the industry with the SIP grants and everything like that is that the PSDs became popular because of the extra $5,000 grant. So I think like a larger portion, a lot of extra PSDs were put in where I think they could have used gravity drain fields. It seems like gravity drain fields are sized the same as conventional IA, and conventional would be the same size. So some of the drain field manufacturers mentioned to me in other jurisdictions, they call pump and dump. Essentially, you're pumping up to a D box to get your, away from the groundwater, and then going from there by gravity. And they tend to think that systems like that are less prone to failure. I don't know if that's the fact, but we would never design something like that because there was no monetary benefit that you would get from the PSD system. You get the extra $5,000 for the grant. So I think that might be an issue too, that maybe we should look at it from the SIP perspective, maybe opening up that the extra grant for any kind of shallow drain field, whether it's gravity or pump, maybe that would be less PSDs and more just traditional gravity drain fields on the market then. That's just an idea I had. I don't know. I just kind of noticed that around 2020 with the pandemic and everything, when everybody was looking for the best deal. Essentially, they were all asking me about PSD systems. So that was like they became very popular. But anyway, that's just something I noticed in the industry that I wanted to address.
I appreciate it, Tom. Yep, and another, it's a excellent observation. Thank you. All right, I'm going to keep moving forward here in the spirit of time because I know we have a lot more slides. Again, if anybody has any other thoughts afterwards, don't hesitate to email us at the health department, any of us, and that's what we're looking for here. So I'm going to talk a little bit about something else that we heard from some of the experts at University of Rhode Island and others on time dosing versus demand dosing. And I'm not going to spend too much time on it. I'm just going to kind of set a primer here for everyone, get maybe some initial feedback, but then as you'll see in a minute, really gather some additional information and do a little bit of evaluation. We'll talk about this again during our next meeting in the fall. But just for quick context, so our current practice right now relies generally on what's referred to as demand dosing, and that means that the PSD is pretty much primarily solely dosed on demand when a certain effluent level is reached within the IA system's final chamber, or if there's a separate pump chamber within a pump chamber. So once it reaches that float, the PSD, the pump turns on, doses the PSD. There's some benefits to this, obviously. It's a relatively simple design, relatively small footprint, lower upfront capital installation costs. But what we've heard from, again, some of these other experts that have been doing this for 20 plus years, is that it can create dosing or conditions that are conducive for the development of what's referred to as a biomat, which once that biomat forms, that can significantly reduce the absorption capacity of the system and result in failure of the system and or more frequent O&M, which on the back end is just going to be an overall increase in costs, whether it's just an O&M or, if the system itself has to be replaced because it's not, can't be, the absorption capacity can't be recovered. An alternate practice that's done in Rhode Island and some other jurisdictions is what they refer to as time dosing. And under time dosing, the PSD itself is dosed at a very particular set time interval, or under alarm conditions when the effluent level reaches a high level alarm. But in general, it's going to be dosed at this specific set time interval. And that creates conditions that are more conducive or less likelihood for the development of this biomat, which in these experts' opinions, significantly extended the life potentially of the PSD itself. So again, the benefit of that is just longer long-term O&M costs and longer life of the system. Now, potential drawbacks, and some of these could be significant. Not so much necessarily any additional design requirement, but for sites that are tight, this would potentially require a larger footprint because you might require a larger pump tank to maintain the required volume for the time dosing, and also related initial higher design and construction costs. So a few options, and then really, like I said, I don't want to spend too much time in this one today. I do want to get some initial feedback from everyone, but also let everybody know that this is just a start and the department's going to be doing some next steps. But potential options, no change to the current requirement, what we're doing right now. Option two, time dosing only required for certain site conditions. And these are just some examples, sites where it's best fit. I know this sounds counterintuitive, but best fit where there's no expansion room. So the counterintuitive thing is, well, if you require an additional tank, then that's counterintuitive. But if at the end of the day, it results in the maximum efficiency and operation of the PSD, well, then that's a positive thing for a small site. Potentially requiring it only for certain soil types, soils that don't percolate or absorb very well, and or only for certain loading rates, if it's decided that loading rates should be revised. And then I guess on the extreme end, option 3, requiring time dosing for all sites at some point down the road. So just some next steps that we were going to do here internally at the health department: do some additional outreach to the experts. We want the industry input, again, either today and or follow-up email or discussions. But I think at the end of the day, for everybody's benefit, probably the biggest thing is like, what's the relative cost benefit of doing this under real world situations? So what is the real world increase in construction costs? What is the potential long-term cost savings? What are the real world implications to sites with limited space? And what are some potential other implications? System complexities, revisions to control panels. This is just going to require, you know, a complete revamp of control panel, additional covers potentially. And then once we get some information from this evaluation, we want to present these at our next meeting with this group here. So with that, any initial thoughts on time dosing versus demand dosing? I know for me, this was relatively new concept, so I'm not sure if this is new to folks on this meeting or if it's something you heard about before, but any initial feedback on this or thoughts?
Hey, Ken, this is Pete.
Hey, Pete.
I just wanted to point out, I think some of the discrepancies with the time dosed and the on demand are for normal septic tanks. I manufacture both ATU and the septic tank, and the INA system really shouldn't lead to any biomatting so long as the INA system is working properly. So that's where I think I just wasn't sure if they were speaking about septic tanks only, because that's where some of the issues, it sounded like to me that's what they were talking about, like a pump tank for the dosing and these pressurized ones with a septic tank, not an INA. So that's all. I just wanted to make sure we were all talking about INA.
Yeah, and it could be, I don't know, Jen or Julie, if you have any context. I think if you recall the discussions with Rhode Island on that.
Island requires time dosing for IA systems.
Thanks, Jen. That's a good point. And to your point, Pete, that's another reason that we want to have additional outreach to experts, including the manufacturing experts, as well as the proximal jurisdiction experts, just to expand those discussions. Okay, well, if there's no other comments, again, feel free to email us. But obviously, for this one, we have some homework to do here, and we're going to present some of those findings and recommendations at our next meeting in the fall.
Hey, Ken, Tom, one more time. The one thing about time dose is you'd have to have a much larger pump tank.
Yeah.
It would have to be like pretty much a day's storage. So say instead of using a 2-foot diameter tank, you'd have to have a roughly 500 or 750 gallon tank. So it's like adding another septic tank to the footprint of that site. And if it's already a tight site near the water that requires a PSD and we're very limited with space, it can be challenging. But just wanted to add that.
Yeah, thanks, Tom, and agreed. And I think one of the things we want to do in this cost benefit analysis is actually to pick a real world, maybe we even pick an existing site and actually attempt to, design one of these systems with a time dose tank to see can you practically make it fit.
Hey, Ken, Bob Eichinger.
Hey, Bob.
Hey, just one thing. I mean, the Septitech is a built-in PSD that's time dosing, once an hour, 24 hours a day. I'm assuming most people know that, but some might not. And I started doing this almost 20 years ago upstate. Time dosing is very popular upstate. It's not in Long Island. It really, has taken a little bit of time to catch on, but it's almost the preferred methodology up in the New York City watershed.
Good input, Bob. Yeah, and generally that was just a consensus from Rhode Island, interestingly as well.
Yeah.
All right, so I'm gonna keep going here in the spirit of time. So again, this is something that we've heard from different manufacturers and also folks at other proximal jurisdictions, really just reminding us that, you know, for PSDs especially, it's just a different world compared to leaching pools, and just a lot more tolerance in leaching pools to be a little off level, or the soils to be a little different. But one of the things that was just pointed to our attention is that just the relative levelness of the base material and the final grade is important to PSDs. And so that being said, how do you what's the best way, economical way all around to make sure that you're getting a level base material and final grade? Because we all know how construction projects go, especially on the final grade end. Like, I don't know that we necessarily have full control over what the final grade is going to end up being once landscaping's done and this and that's done. So all stuff for us to consider, but some potential options: just no change to our current inspection or final approval process. These are things that we just brainstormed internally here. Another option would be DHS inspection, just confirming the levelness of the base and final grades, possibly with just as simple as a laser level or something like that. Nothing extensive here, relatively simple, but just some sort of level of QC. Another option, I guess these all go, in my mind, in terms of increasing complexity, requiring final elevations of the base material and the final grade to be measured and certified by the design professional as part of the final approval of the project. And so in that case, potentially an engineer could do it on his own, not necessarily under a licensed surveyor. And then option 4, those elevations would have to be recorded by a licensed land surveyor if it's different than the design professional itself. So again, these are just 4 brainstormed options that can increase the level of complexity, I guess, in my mind. Any observations from folks in the field in terms of any difficulty in what you're doing in terms of levelness, and anything that you've seen after the fact, even like, or ideas with homeowners after the fact? They're not supposed to do certain things, but they put landscaping over it, and you know, what used to be 12 to 18 inches of level final grade, now who knows, it's 30 inches and it's landscaped. Any thoughts or observations from the industry on this?
Hi, it's Adriana with Direct Drainage. Yeah, we are seeing a lot of it, but we're not seeing it until we go back to do our first maintenance.
Yep.
You go to try and find the covers, and well, now they're buried and they're under beautiful grass. And now you start digging the covers up and the homeowners are having a stroke. And then you tell them, well, they need to add more collar to raise the grade up so the covers can sit on grade. And well, they don't want to look at the covers, so they're not doing that. So yeah, it is a problem with grade elevations after the fact. And it's really out of our control once we're done with the job and we grade it off, and they come in and do whatever they want.
Excellent point, Adriana. And that feedback that you just said, that's huge too, even in terms of other possible options. Just thinking about homeowner education, even, you know, we can have further discussions here at the department, but we have the means. Even what you just said, we have the means through O&M by the O&M providers, or even our folks here that are collecting samples, to do spot checks of these, right? QC checks in terms of what was there. And so if nothing else, what you just said, we can get the data to determine if a system's final elevations have changed, and then we can discuss internally here on our end, you know, what do we do with that information? All right, if there's nothing else, I'm going to keep going. Again, it's spirit of time here. So base material requirements, and you know, this is definitely one that I heard mixed feelings from experts versus the industry, and you know, maybe some contradictions. And so current practice, PSD is installed directly on native soil. Generally, there are certain cases where It may not be that Matt talked about before. Lower cost, optimized treatment. I think from a treatment perspective, everything that we've heard is it's optimal to have the PSD installed directly on a native soil. And then the only potential drawbacks that we heard potentially from the industry and internally was just, so if you do that, if the soil is, say, a silt or a clay or some sort of tight material, then really you're not getting any additional quote unquote storage volume for effluent that goes into the system. If it was sand or gravel, that could provide, in the pore space, could provide some additional storage volume potentially. And native soils may or may not be more difficult to level if you're truly supposed to be putting the PSD on virgin, native soil that's not smeared or disturbed, so to speak, to the least extent possible. Then it could be a little more difficult to level. But I guess the only other options that we could think of internally initially was PSDs being installed on some sort of minimum bed of, say, ASTM C33 sand or something like that, whether it's 6 inches or whatever it is, something to provide a little bit more storage volume potentially, and a little bit more of a leveling medium. Now, for certain types of PSDs, it might be great, and sand generally, when installed correctly, shouldn't really settle too much. But we've heard from some of the folks in industry, well, that's not necessarily true. Certain systems can settle a little bit, which can cause a problem. And then we've also heard a little bit, well, the storage volume thing, that sounds great and all, but the practical reality is for most sites that they worked at around the country, at the end of the day, the PSD, the limiting factor was the native soil underneath it anyway, that percolation rate of the native soil underneath it, and that, their opinion, the additional storage volume from, say, a sand layer didn't really have a significant benefit. But any field observations or thoughts just on this concept of potentially adding a bed of whatever thickness, whatever material, try to provide some additional storage volume or levelness?
Hi, Ken.
Yeah.
Hi, this is Katie Maresca speaking. Our details, we always call for at least that 6 inches of the ASTM C33. We're seeing in field, none of the installers are doing that. We've had to stop some jobs during construction because the installers just refuse to buy the right type of sand. Is there a way that the health department also checks this?
So I think the short answer, and Matt and anybody else feel free to correct me, is no, we don't specifically check that, but that's a good observation, and maybe there's a way to check it through a receipt or some sort of verification.
That's what we're requesting, is a receipt, and then they become very shy about showing that information, and we find out it's because they didn't buy the right thing.
Okay. Good info, thank you.
Ken, Tom again. The geotextile sand filter technology, like the Elgins and some of the Infiltrator ATL products and other things, Presby maybe, they all use like a 6-inch sand layer in the trench. So there might be some like good data there saying that 6 inches of filtration before meeting the native media might help drainage, but I don't know much about that. Maybe people in Rhode Island and the technologies would have some information they could share with the county in regard to that.
All right, thanks, Tom. Okay, so I'm going to keep going here again in the spirit of time. We have a lot to get through. And I'm going to buzz through these relatively quick again, hear any initial comments, and then if, again, email us or feel free to pick up the phone. Happy to talk as well if you're more comfortable with that. But so just some other considerations, again, things that we've heard from recommendations from some of the experts and other jurisdictions and the manufacturers as well. So potentially requiring root barriers under certain conditions. I can tell you that we saw at least one system that the holes in the distribution pipe were plugged with roots. So we know that that is a realistic thing that can happen. So potentially requiring root barriers under certain conditions, not necessarily for all systems, but again, on number 2, potentially, this is again came from Rhode Island, using a different soils classification system to establish design loading rates versus percolation tests. And I think they might use the USC. Jen, feel free to correct me if I'm misspeaking on that, but that, in their opinion, doing that specific soil classification method provided the most accurate means of determining the soil's absorption rate. In their opinion, even above a percolation test, interestingly. But I would say the potential hurdle with it is that's something that's not learned overnight, right? That requires training, and it could require training and experience. So just something to consider, something for us to consider. We're going to talk more with Rhode Island and understand a little bit more of what they're doing and how they're doing it, potentially how they train the industry. But and then last but not least, just consider limiting installation depths to 12 inches to 18 inches max. I know I think our standards allow up to 30 inches now, but hypothetically, if it's a PSD, is there any specific reason that that we shouldn't limit it to 12 to 13 inches max? And it'll promote additional treatment. Being in a shallower horizon should be a little bit lower costs, and potentially be less risk for preferential loading due to like uneven base material, either getting uneven or potentially the cover material. But again, just any initial reactions to these three other concepts that we've heard from the outside world and experts and local experts as well. All right, that being said, I'm going to continue moving forward to, oh, I apologize, got one more thing I wanted to mention on pressurized shallow drain fields. So this is one of the things that we noticed at least one of the sites, maybe 2 sites, was, and very recent case example was a site that, so for folks that are familiar with the septic improvement program, we allow, currently allowed projects that didn't have a test hole to use a test hole from an adjacent project site. I think Office of Wastewater Management staff were even helping uncover those. That was to save money, maximize grant funds and on the installation. But we've definitely seen at least once, and it's just fresh in my memory because it just happened, that coincidentally, the site next door that we used was SPSW, and then the system PSD was installed on the adjacent property, and it was all silt and clay. So, that's obviously a problem. And if percolation rates or absorption rates are part of the loading rates that we have, part of the concern, and for certain sites, then using the practice of using borings from adjacent sites might be a contradiction. It was with the best intentions, but based on the lessons learned, what we think we're going to do is not allow that practice. We're going to, the way we're going to look into, we still have additional discussions with our law department and other folks just to confirm that we can allow these costs to be qualifying costs in the program. So at least from the homeowner's perspective, they could qualify this test hole or percolation test that could qualify for reimbursement. And then the other thing I wanted to mention that's going to be key in all of this, and I think everybody would agree, is that we are going to work with industry representatives to establish training classes specifically for the design and installation of PSDs. We think it's important, again, based on everything we're hearing from the proximal jurisdictions, and I think most of the folks here would agree that it would be a benefit to everybody, just educating on all the stuff we're talking about today and some of the things to look out for. So now, with that being said, take a quick moment again to pause. If there's any other industry questions, observations, concerns that anyone wants to mention on PSDs, is there anybody else out there that has had any thoughts? The one thing I wanted to mention, again, if you're not comfortable in this environment, that's fine. Feel free to call us or email us. But yeah, we've heard some anecdotal statements that some of the pumps, effluent pumps on some of the IA systems were burning out faster than anticipated. The pressurized shallow drain field wasn't confirmed to be clogged, but there was just a potential theory that could have been the cause. Anybody else on this particular meeting have any other observations to what you've seen in the field or heard? And again, if you're not comfortable, we can feel free to follow up with us separately.
I guess I'll add, effluent pumps aren't like a one size fits all system. Every PSD system is different, whether it's, you know, how many laterals, how long the laterals. The larger the system, you need a larger pump. You know, we're designing everything for a 5-foot distal head, equally dispersed throughout all the orifices. So, you know, having the right pump and making sure the right pump that was sized correctly was installed, I think goes a long way. If the pump can't achieve that distal head and you're getting a slower velocity through the PSD laterals, you could potentially be more prone to clogging or having other problems. Or also having a dose volume that's correct. So if you have a very large PSD system, it takes a certain amount of gallons just to fill all of the laterals and the pipes. And, you know, that needs to be figured out before you design the pump tank, because if you have a maximum dosing rate of, say, 10 or 15 gallons and you have a large drain field, then you're going to go through a cycle and you're not even going to fill the system up. So you're never going to get the proper performance out of that PSD. I believe the PSDs, you know, you want to get the pipes full and equally squirting for the whole dose across the system, or you're then definitely going to get certain areas of that drain field which are going to get all of the water, which may lead to be more prone to failing. That's just one of my observations I made. And the pump manufacturers all have pretty good programs to use to figure that out, but that's just, we have to take care of that at the design level and make sure that those pumps are installed and that no shortcuts are taken, or there could be problems.
Okay, thanks, Tom. All right, so if there's no other questions, now we can officially move on to Jen's IA OWTS update.
You can. So yeah, I'm just going to go through really quick and give a update on how our IAs are doing in Suffolk County. Starting off with the permitting trends in Office of Wastewater Management for IAs specifically. So you can see on this chart that on average, we're seeing about 140 applications received on a monthly basis for IAs specifically. And this is for full permit applications, not inclusive of SHIP registrations. So this is just full permit. And our Office of Wastewater Management is turning out about average of 125 IA permits approved for installation per month. You can see that we're starting this in July of 2021, which is when the requirements came into effect that all new construction and major renovation had to use IAs. And you can see since then, we're seeing a steady increase in IA applications as expected. Next slide. We have our 4 currently provisionally approved systems: Septitech Star, Orenco Advantex AX20, Norweco Hydrokinetic, and Norweco Singular TNT. All are able to be installed here in Suffolk County on an unlimited basis. We also have additional technologies that can be installed here under our experimental and pilot phases of approval. So those do have limitations on how many can be installed, but you can go on our website, reclaimourwater.info, the sites here at the bottom. Check out some of those if you'd like to get involved with some of the newer technologies coming into Suffolk County. Move on to the next slide. Just a quick look at how our provisionally approved IA systems are doing right now. So under provisional approval, these IA systems have to be sampled every 60 days for at least 2 years. So 12 samples per system. And these systems are all working on that right now. Septitech has 20 systems installed, and they have so far submitted 128 samples, and their average is at 15.8 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen. The Arenco AX20 has currently 19 systems that they're testing out of the 20 and 189 samples, and their average is 17.3. The Norweco Hydrokinetic right now only has 5 residential systems installed and 104 samples to get a total average total nitrogen concentration of 17.9 milligrams per liter. So all of those 3 are staying underneath the Suffolk County standard of 19 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen, which is what they need to move through this approval phase into general use approval. Just a reminder on here, the 65 milligram per liter line is what we would expect to see in standard septic tank, conventional system effluent for total nitrogen. So you can see every system is achieving a much lower concentration than that. And then our final one down here is Norweco Singular, which is coming in just over that 19 milligram per liter line. They are currently under a remedial action plan with us. So we've spoken with Norweco. We're working with them to try to improve performance of the Singular here in Suffolk County. And we will continue to do that until we decide whether that system is going to be able to get to under that 19 milligram per liter standard. Next slide. Moving on from there, we have our 2 generally approved systems. This is for residential general use. Hydro Action was approved for general use approval in December of 2021, and their average of the first 20 year-round residential systems was 11.1 milligrams per liter of total nitrogen. The FujiClean system was generally approved for residential systems in February of 2022, not long after, and their average was 10.2 milligrams per liter total nitrogen. Next slide. So we also have some proposed standards revisions relating to IAs beyond just the PSDs that we had already talked about. So those 3 have to do with the first being commercial IA design to require manufacturer or vendor certification. Number 2 would be to update the minimum requirements for system covers and risers. And number 3, to establish requirements to immediately address odors, meeting the definition of a public nuisance. Move on to the next slide. So we're going to go into each of those now. So the first, commercial design requiring vendor certification. So the commercial IA designs we're finding require components that are not utilized typically for residential systems. And depending on the proposed site use, these components might be necessary to achieve the required treatment level, so that 19 milligrams per liter treatment. This is basically saying that every use of a commercial system varies and the waste stream produced by that use varies. And some of these components will help to reduce BOD, TSS to limits that are more conducive to treatment, that more represent what you would see in a residential waste stream. So moving forward with this standard revision, we would be asking IA designers to submit proposed plans to the vendor to receive a sign-off prior to submitting to the Office of Wastewater Management. Basically, that's going to give the vendors an opportunity to recommend various components that they feel might be necessary based on the waste stream that you're proposing for. We want this to happen as early in a project as possible to avoid delays in OWM approval process and also potential delays in purchasing of an IA unit. Of course, here in Suffolk County, we have a robust program to see that our IAs are performing at necessary levels. So all of these IA vendors and manufacturers have a vested interest in making sure that their systems are designed well and performing well. So we want them to be able to get their hands on those plans and make sure that the treatment process is going to work, and they feel that it's to the best possible scenario for that site and that system. This sign off from the vendor is going to apply to the treatment process only. So it's not going to be for them to look at where the system's located on the site, not for them to figure out how to meet your setbacks or anything like that. They're just going to be looking at the treatment process and the waste stream coming from that building. In addition to this, the IA vendors will be expected to produce some information to the vendor guidance document specifically for commercial systems for designers and installers to see and be a little bit more familiar as to why they're adding these components and when they will be wanting those components to be added. Next slide.
Thanks, Jen. Jen, I just wanted to add two quick things, very quick. One, that the goal here, and something that we've spoken with everybody about, is not to increase the backlog time for a permit approval. Generally, our sense from all the IA vendors is that things can be turned around very quickly within a few days or a day or two. And I think most design professionals probably know, at least for me, coming from the consulting world and broader water and wastewater treatment world, this concept of having a vendor take a look at things and basically just say, yep, that's good, that looks good, that's fine, happens every day, and that, you know, in the broader treatment world. So this is an intent. This whole process is really intended to cover everybody and make the program successful. Just add another level of quality control that's going to happen quickly. That's all I wanted to add, Jen.
Yeah, and in addition to that, we've reached out and spoken to our major vendors here locally and manufacturers of our most popular systems, and they're all on board with this. They want to see plans before they get to the point where they've sat in wastewater and waited all that time. So we want to see those sign-offs coming into an application, not several months down the road as it's being reviewed. So it's ultimately going to make the process faster.
Thanks, Jen.
All right, the next one is minimum cover and riser requirements. So we're looking to update the minimum design requirements for plastic covers and risers potentially. This would be an Article 6 change. And we'd be basically looking to specify acceptable materials or strength or design of the riser and the fastening points between the riser and the cover. You can see in the picture over here on the side, some of what we see, and this happens in multiple different products, is these plastic pieces where the connection point is between the screw and the cover and the riser are being broken. There's a limited number of spots that they can be held, and once those spots are broken, there's a major safety issue. Beyond just a major safety issue, it can lead to odors because there's not a good seal being formed. We're also looking at setting minimum performance requirements for covers and risers of each individual system. So this would be an Article 19 revision. And this is just an example of something that might be used to do this, which would be that a minimum of 4 evenly spaced points must continue to exist at all times to adequately secure the cover to the riser for thermoplastic application, plastic covers and risers. So basically saying that if there's so many broken spots that you can no longer adequately seal a cover to a riser, it's going to have to be changed out. Covers and risers that do not meet minimum performance requirements are considered a safety hazard and can cause odor nuisances. Like I said, they have to be replaced by the contracted maintenance provider as part of the cost of the O&M contract. And that's, of course, unless the cover is damaged at the fault of the homeowner. And I see Adriana is raising her hand. Go ahead, Adriana.
Sorry, I apologize. My phone wouldn't come off of mute. So unfortunately, what we're seeing out there as being an installer and a maintenance provider is that there's multiple people going out there and opening and closing these covers and damaging them. So how should we be responsible to replace that at our cost when, say, the county was out there to do sampling and didn't put the cover back on correctly?
So I can tell you that we can tell you which ones we go out to on a regular basis. And so like this example that I have sitting here, this is the first time we were ever to this site. So I know early on that was a point of discussion, and definitely understandable when it was our first systems where we were going out to them very frequently. And if it was ever a point where it was a system that we were going out to very frequently, that's definitely a point to be discussed. But we have a lot more systems now, and we're going to have even more. This is going to be something that we're not seeing systems very frequently. So I think it's up for discussion. Like I said, these are all things that we want to pass through you guys and see what you have to say. But there's definitely going to be wear and tear on these from just normal maintenance. And, we have to figure out how to get them changed out. Like I said, it's a safety issue. So if you have some, thoughts on a better way, definitely let us know.
Yeah, everybody just needs to be a little bit more careful when they're taking the screws out, laying the covers back down, and making sure that they're actually lined up before they put those screws back in. If they're careful when they remove, put the covers back on, it's not removing them, but putting them back on, that everything is lined up, then everything should go out back into place properly. But we're also seeing it too on steel covers to grade, that the bolts aren't being put back in, which is a problem as well. Those are in driveways most of the time.
Yeah.
We get to the site to do maintenance and the bolts are removed and not put back on, and they're loose because they're not properly secured. So this is an issue for not just installers, but for the manufacturers and the county, that are also on site, opening and closing these covers. So I just think, if everybody just takes a little bit more time to make sure that everything's lined up and everything is secure before they leave, we can probably eliminate this issue.
Mm-hmm. Yep, I agree with that.
What I think is conceivably a workaround and would be effective. The difference between Amazon deliveries and FedEx and UPS. The difference is Amazon takes pictures of exactly where they place the delivery, and FedEx does not do that. So there's always a question of how it's been misdelivered or anything of that caliber. So conceivably, and this goes really hand in hand with doing a more rigorous job of logging, various activities, and that runs the gamut from doing these kinds of inspections with the cover removals, photographing it when you're finished, to logging the hauling in a more effective way, because manifesting at the end of the day gives everybody in the entire system a window into what's going on, and where the conceivable shortcomings are. So this is clearly, I think, as we move forward, a candidate for the Acela system, where the services really provided, and photographs are taken to document how it was when they arrived and how it looks when they leave. It's very simple.
Great. It's a great idea. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's been noted. Thank you, Dorian. Any other comments on that? All right, we'll move on. So as discussed, some of the issue also with those covers is that we're getting odor complaints from some of the systems. Of course, every system we'd love to be working perfectly. There are some systems that have issues and produce odors. The system itself should be able to control those odors and put them in places where they are not considered a public health nuisance. So here you can see, this is just from our sanitary code, our local sanitary code here, Article 5. It lays out what, that basically a public health nuisance is a constitutes nuisance, which is the opinion of the commissioner, may affect health or is the cause of such nuisance existing elsewhere. So there is a piece in the sanitary code that allows us to address nuisance complaints rather, that aren't a direct public health threat, and odor complaints will be held under this and addressed as required.
Yeah, and Jen, I think initially we were thinking that this cover, as we move forward with, the best path for coverage, should take care of most of this. I think some of the sites that we've gotten complaints about, as Jen mentioned before, our best guess was it was related to the covers, but it's just something, again, as we move forward, if 380,000 of these are going in the ground, we want to be on top of, and you know, relatively simple to address, I think, at the end of the day.
So our standards next step and implementation schedule, July 8th, 2022. We'll be looking for any comments that you guys have from this meeting. Like Ken said, feel free to reach out to us via email, call. We're open to anything just to get some opinions, thoughts, anything we could do better. Fall 2022 will be the next stakeholders meeting to review draft standards and findings of the time dosing evaluation. And then you'll be given 2 weeks after that for any final comments. And in winter 2022, we'll be looking to finalize standards from there. Next slide. We have some upcoming online training opportunities coming up in August and December. I believe these are going to be continuing to be online. Yep. So please feel free to go on and check those out. If you need your credits, get signed up. And our list of contacts for that training, DCA, through us here for the training courses that we'll be having, and the New England On-Site Wastewater Training Center at URI. And any other questions, comments, anything on IAs?
All right. Again, doors always open. So next up, Julia is going to give an update on the septic improvement program. Julia, did you want to take over the PowerPoint, or do you want me to run through? Either ways, okay.
I'll take a minute just to swap it over. I have it ready here. All right. I believe you're seeing what I'm seeing, the septic improvement program update slide, housed here in the Office of Ecology at the Suffolk County Department of Health Services. Our go-to email address is septicdemo@suffolkcountyny.gov, and our direct phone number here, 631-852-5811. And just a reminder, please do email us if you would like to get those credits for today's class. 2 credits have been approved by DCA. And so please send us your name, your company name, and your liquid waste license number so we can get that certificate out to you. And I'm just going to run through the septic improvement program as our final topic this afternoon. A recap of where we are since we began almost 5 years ago, starting July 1st, 2017 is when SIP was launched, and the New York State SSRP grant began in October 2018. $21.7 million Suffolk County invested into the SIP program, plus an additional $4.5 million was just recently awarded to the SIP program as well. New York State has invested over $20 million in addition to Suffolk County for the SSRP program, and Suffolk County has submitted a request for the 3rd round of funding from New York State to add to our growing program. This grant funding, the county, the state, as well as the East End Town CPF grant programs, enables Suffolk County to implement upgrades to IA systems in accordance with Subwatershed's wastewater plan prior to the establishment of a countywide wastewater management district and a recurring revenue stream. So we are right on track prior to the establishment of that district. Right now we have 3,398 applications through our online Reclaim Our Water website application. So thousands of homeowners contacting our office and interested in upgrading to IA system. We have to date 1,845 county SIP grants issued. Of those, there's approximately 580 that are active, that are still active, have the grant funding awarded to them, but have not yet completed their installation yet. And similarly with the New York State grant funds, usually homeowners receive both of these grants, but sometimes they only qualify for one or the other. We have 1,874 New York State SSRP grants issued to date, with about 640 of those being currently active. So there are many homeowners out there that already have grant funding and could go ahead with their IA installations with those grant funds at any time. Our staff does continually go through those grant awardees to make sure, you know, oh, your grant's about to expire. Do you need to get an extension? Are you still interested? Have you moved? You know, things like that. So we make sure that the effort that was put into that application and grant awardee process is carried through towards an IA installation. That's our main goal here. On average, we have been seeing this year 87 new applications each month. And so interest has not been waning whatsoever. We've actually been seeing an increase lately, and as well as a large increase in installations, which I show here. We have on our chart, if there's chart people out there like me, we have it broken down by year and month and the totals for each year. We have a total of 1,117 SIP and or SSRP funded IA installations to date. We keep track of these installations once the grant funds have been paid out. So there are more, I'm sure, that have already been installed, but not yet paid out because we haven't yet received that paperwork or it's incomplete. And so we go back and update these numbers as necessary. But as you can see on the chart on the bottom, that orange line that shows you the total amount over time is continuing to reach an upward direction. Over 1,000 IAs installed with grant funding. We do know there's approximately another 1,000 on top of that that are installed in Suffolk County without the use of grant funding. But you can see this spring has been really I'm sure you installers here and manufacturers here have noticed it as well, quite busy spring in regards to IA installs, which is great. We still have only what, 3,790,000 left to go, but we're making headway, obviously. And then just an update on where we are in regard to grant funding, because we cannot move forward with any grant issuance until we make sure that we have that grant funding to back us up. Recently, Suffolk County SIP was awarded another $4.5 million towards this program. And so now we have sufficient funds to issue over 400 Suffolk County SIP grants, likely take us through the beginning of 2023. And as I mentioned, a request for the third disbursement of New York State SSRP funding has been made to New York State. Here are some numbers. Over 11.1 million of the county SIP funds have been paid out to installers to date, with over 19 million of the total grant funding allocated to grant awardees. And over $10.5 million of the New York State grant funds have been paid out, with over 17 million of our total grant funds allocated to grant awardees. And I have broken down here, we keep track of the funding, as well as how many more grants are left, with their approximate timeline for full allocation of grant funds, all the numbers. And then I just wanted to do a quick recap. Back in June 2020, as we all remember, after months of really high increased level of installations during the pandemic, the initial SIP funding and first round of New York State funding was fully allocated to grant awardees. The funding was exhausted, and during that time of limited funds over the next 12 months or so, we were able to issue about 108 grants of SIP grants, but that was only when grant funds became available. For example, if someone withdrew. And so, but during that same time, we received 783 new applications from June 2020 to May 2021. And so that created a backlog of homeowners looking to upgrade, looking to get those grants. And so by May 2021, when additional $10 million of SIP and the second round of the additional $10 million of New York State grant funding were made available, our program was able to restart. Weekly batches of both SIP and county SIP and New York State grants have been continuing since then, over a year now. And catastrophic failures with public health or safety risks are all now being handled immediately. That went into place in the fall of 2021. And so that's in addition to the weekly batches of the county and state grants. Those catastrophic failures get handled, the day that they are completed. We also have a category of not all non-catastrophic failures. Those grants are all issued in date order once they're complete. Currently, we have no complete applications pending grant issuance for non-catastrophic failures. Every once in a while, homeowner gives us the final documentation, even though they originally applied last year, then we're able to issue them that grant that week. And so essentially what I'm trying to say here is no backlog on those non-catastrophic failures, which I do want to mention also includes block cesspools. If we have documentation that that property has a block cesspool, that is considered a non-catastrophic failure. And that is now also shown on our online application when homeowners apply. It describes what a non-catastrophic failure is and includes that in that definition of block cesspool. And if a homeowner says they have either a catastrophic or non-catastrophic failure, they must upload proof. The application will not let you complete it and submit it without uploading that proof of failure, as well as the other documents. But on that note, sometimes homeowners will just upload something. You're supposed to upload your deed and you just upload, your tax bills instead or something like that. And although that lets you submit your application, that doesn't mean that you have a complete application and we are able to move on with that. We do need to have that complete application with all required documentation in order for us to actually, issue that grant. And so if you are helping homeowners or if there's any excavators out there, please just know, like, having that initial application submission with all the complete documents is really beneficial for us and yourself and your clients. And it's really would be great to achieve that goal so that we can all move forward with issuing as many grants as possible and getting these installed and paid out as quickly as possible. Sorry for that side note. Last bullet here on the grant backlog is that in addition, we are now also issuing grants to complete SIP applications that have no failure. And so we were able to go back to the people that have been waiting in the queue for quite a long time due to that lack of funding and the scoring. And currently we're issuing grants to applicants with no failure in a priority area 1 area with an application submission date of approximately summer 2021. And so in other news, this last month in May 2022, the office processed and paid out over $523,000 in New York State SSRP grants. That is the largest monthly amount to date. And so that's largely due to two things. We have obviously a lot of IAs being installed right now, a lot of cesspools being replaced, and those grants being utilized, as well as new staff that we have here in Suffolk County Health Department that's helping process all those payments. So big shout out to Tom. He emailed some of these installers that are on our call today. Thanks for all your help, as well as all the other staff I'll mention in a minute. All grant payments are processed and submitted to audit and control the week they are submitted and complete here, as long as the keyword there is complete, as long as we have all those required documents. And I do have a slide at the end as a little reminder of what we do need to have in order to process those grant payments. Just a few program enhancements that have been implemented to expedite the grant issuance and IA installation and grant fund payout. We, as I mentioned before, updated the SIP rules and regulations for catastrophic failures and non-catastrophic failures. New York State SSRP application used to be a separate paper application, and now that is included on the SIP Reclaimer Water website online application. And so as a homeowner completes that once, they don't have to fill out anything else on a paper application, as well as some of that New York State SSRP forms. They used to have 5 pages of the assignment of payment and reimbursement request form. Those are now combined into 1 page, and we no longer require that contractor signature. So that is definitely helping expedite getting these okay to proceeds and installations as quickly as possible. So that was implemented in mid-December. So all grant awardees that were issued a grant from mid-December on have just that one pager of that New York State form, and they can utilize that one. Any grant awardees that were issued grants before that do need to continue to use the forms that were issued along with their grant. And so if you have any questions of which kind of form your clients have, just feel free to reach out to us. We also have been able to permanently reassign staff to the SIP program in addition to hiring additional staff here to fill some holes. And as we are training new staff, we'll be able to, just expedite even more, maybe get more grants out there and get them out the door as soon as possible to grant awardees. All grant awards include pre-filled forms, so homeowners don't need to fill out any more than they need to, and they're all fully flagged of where they need to initial and sign and get notarized. And we do that because we see that it really does help homeowners get those grant awards back, grant contracts back to us properly. And in addition, I mentioned that continuous outreach to grant awardees that our staff has been doing. So just wanted to have a huge shout out to all of our SIP staff. Thank you so much. Joan and Yuke. Yuke are one of our new staff members, and Joan, many of you have spoken to on the phone or emailed with. Thank you for helping homeowners go through the application process, and Anna Marie with our contracts and vetting these applications. Michelle helps us flag all these contracts. Joy reviews all your price quotes. Rita's checking your Google Sheets and giving you the okay to proceeds, and Tom is issuing your payments. So that's some of the names that are behind the secret septic demo email address. And I also just wanted to mention the last thing for SIP is that we are going to be issuing an additional SOQ addendum. We are issuing this SOQ addendum in response to feedback we have received from industry like yourselves. Given the unprecedented rise in the raw cost of materials, we understand costs are increasing, and that under the existing SOQ, you are locked into those price quotes that you submitted back in December of 2021. And so here is an opportunity for submitting additional price quotes. And so here's just a quick example of some of the documentation we have received from the industry documenting there has been an increase in prices, and we want to give that opportunity to vendors to provide new year one quotes on their quote sheets through the end of 2022. That's supposed to say 12/31/2022. And we do expect this addendum to be issued around July 1st. We're going to get it out as soon as possible. Certain line items can be updated, and they're going to be clearly described in this SOQ. For example, total cost of IA unit materials, line 1, retail price of IA. That's something that can be updated and resubmitted. However, we do require documentation of updated pricing that needs to be submitted for each one, just proving understandably where you're getting these numbers from and what's the need for the update. But we understand that there is a need for that. This is in addition to the option that all vendors have to update their year 2 price quotes by the end of the year for the 2023 year. And so an example of acceptable proof of increases prices, the updated Hydro Action and Wastewater Works price quote sheets. And so when the SOQ addendum is issued, we will send out a blast email. Please feel free to contact me if you feel like July 1st has come around and passed and you're left in the dark. Make sure we get it out to you. And then this is the slide I just wanted to mention, a reminder of what we need in order to process those grant payments to our installers. The itemized invoice with the invoice number, installation date, the reference number, the itemized pumping and decommissioning cost, O&M agreement cost, and sales tax, because those are not eligible for New York State, and sales tax is not eligible for county SIP grants. One payment voucher for each grant. So if your homeowner has 2 grants, please submit 2 payment vouchers with original signatures. and the final installation paperwork. This is in addition to your normal submission to the Office of Wastewater Management. And so we see SIP checks being mailed 2 to 3 weeks after a complete submission to our office, and New York State SSRP checks mailed approximately 3 to 5 weeks after submission, due to New York State checks are just issued every other week, and we have to submit that to New York State, and then we get approval. So it just takes an extra week or 2. So please continue to reach out to us through our septic demo email address, and share any needs. We heard what you had to say about these increases in prices, and we hope that the proposed SOQ addendum meets those needs, but please let us know your comments on that as well. I see a hand from Adriana at the top.
So my question is talking about the homeowners filling out the grant application and submitting proof of their catastrophic failure. So we expecting these homeowners to go out in their backyard and dig up their cesspool and take pictures of it?
So we have, well, catastrophic failure, that sounds like something that is clear to, homeowners. Like, you could just take a picture of, like, whatever it is that's what we receive from homeowners. Is your toilet backing up? Is there just, collapse in your yard? Like, nothing that we're asking you to dig up. That's for catastrophic failure. Non-catastrophic failure, that's if you are pumping several times a year, that's uploading those receipts. If you have, letters from your service provider, things like that. And the block cesspool, if that homeowner and their designer and installer is going through the SHIP portal, that's the same documentation that they need to submit through SHIP, that photo documentation that is block cesspool. And so that is, that's what they could upload there.
So they would,
we really need to have that
we
proof.
weren't on site, right? So if we weren't on site, so say they call and they say, I have this collapsing cesspool in my yard, and we go through all the process to, okay, apply for the grants and so on and so forth. They can't complete their grant application until somebody goes out there to take pictures of their collapsing pool. Because not always can you see it from the ground. Sometimes you have, maybe roots are holding the pool together, but it is collapsing underneath the roots. So you have to gain access to that cesspool in order to prove that. And we're finding that it's difficult. I'm out there putting my guys out there saying, hey, you have to take these pictures and you got to get close, because they can't see that it's a block. That you have to make sure that you could see that it's block, or that it's collapsing, or that there's roots, and it kind of puts people in danger.
Yeah. Well, we are not able to upgrade and confirm their score as a non-catastrophic failure, that score of 90, until we have that proof. So they can go ahead and submit that application. And once they submit that proof, we could update their application to the new score, deem it complete.
So what about sites that you can't take a picture of? Can we have a meeting where the county comes out and they can visually see it themselves? Because I have a site right now that I'm going back and forth. And no matter how many times I go there and take pictures, it's not acceptable, because you guys can't see it and my guys can't get close enough. So it's now a lingering situation where I have a collapsing pool and I can't get it to move forward. So we can set up an appointment and have an inspector come out and they can get close enough to look at it and put themselves in danger?
Well, we don't want to put anyone in danger. I agree with you on that. Through SHIP or SIP, we can work with all these installers if we need to go out to the site. If you're able to provide us with anything, we could start with that. And then,
I've provided, there's one particular, I don't have the information in front of me because I'm at home now, but there's one particular site that I've been back and forth with. And I've provided a letter stating exactly what's going on there. I did provide pictures. They are hard to see because of, where everything is, but we're not moving forward at this point. We've kind of been shut down. So I don't know what else to do. And the homeowners are calling going, please help me. And
Yeah.
What do I
Adriana,
do?
let me ask you this question then. What would you do if you were overseeing and managing this particular part of the program? I mean, what do you think is the solution?
I mean, I think if what, you know, if we're submitting a letter, you know, putting our name on it, stating that this is what's going on there, that should be acceptable. Or there should be an option that we can call in an inspection and have an inspector come out then. There's got to be another option than just shutting us down, saying we need better pictures.
Yeah, sorry that this site has been difficult for you guys, and we do want to resolve that. We just have been seeing that the same letter from some companies, the exact same language for every site that they've been to, and we know it's not accurate. And so that's why we have been looking for that proof of failure. But we want to get to the bottom of this one. So please do, let's go over that. Let's go out to that site and, you know, make sure.
Let's use this as a case study to figure out what we can do.
Okay, that would be great. So I'll be in touch with you tomorrow when I'm back in the office.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sean, I see your hands up. Sean O'Neill.
Hello, can you? Hi, Julia. Yes, Sean O'Neill from Bridgewater here. Just two basic comments. One, we have a catastrophic failure with a collapsed pool next to a swimming pool, elderly lady's home, that we submitted, I imagine about 2 weeks ago with all the pictures, all the documentation, all that, and haven't heard back on. And it is definitely a health hazard. I mean, it's a, you know, it's not just her own, you know, the cesspool itself, but also it's next to a pool. It's built obviously not to code, and so it's concerning. And it brings back a project we worked on last year with a elderly decorated veteran whose whole driveway collapsed. He was disabled and was like an incredible health hazard to this guy.
Yeah.
Issue ended up being, it took us about 3 months to get the grant approved. The issue ended up being he had a CO issue that had to be sorted out with the town. Now, I get the reason we need all the different documentation. It makes complete and obvious sense to me. However, I feel like, you know, if in these catastrophic situations, the onus really is on the installer if they want to be paid to make sure all the paperwork is correct eventually. So if we're going to continue to allow like a public health problem, easily documented public health, you know, real danger to exist, and we're going to hold it up, you know, because of a CO issue, you know, for someone that can't afford to just replace it out of pocket, I don't think that's the best process. And if they're, and considering, especially since, like I said, the onus is on the installer to have the paperwork correct. So if in some of these situations, if there was a way to actually fix the problem, to actually install the system right away, once we can document, maybe get on a phone call, get on a Zoom with the health department, and then, you know, and the grants, the money itself would be pending, you know, proper completion of paperwork. I think it addresses the problem better than the current system. And it's just my comments on this, and I'm, you know, happy to discuss further or, you know, hear what you guys have to say about that.
Yeah, please do send more information about that one specific site. If you just send me a note, we'll look into that. That one that you're saying was submitted several weeks ago and you haven't heard back on yet. This is the reason why we made those changes back in the fall of 2021. For like example, the one you were mentioning with the veteran, like, you know, people that had a lower score because they weren't in priority one, just because they had a catastrophic failure didn't really mean anything back then. Now it does. And in regard to COs, we are not looking for an updated CO that has everything present on the property. The purpose of the CO is to prove this is a single family dwelling or single family dwelling with accessory apartment, you know, meets the definition of that's in the law of this for SIP. And so I don't, you know, not exactly familiar with exactly what happened with that CO, but I don't think that that should be holding it up. It's just a matter of we need to make sure there's something from the town. The CO is the way to prove to us that this is for a single family dwelling.
Right. Let's say someone doesn't have a deed, or the deed is in someone else's name and they don't have the updated paperwork. a lot of time we'll have to go to a town or a village hall to get the updated thing. And if that's, if that's preventing a catastrophic failure from being replaced, it's just, I don't understand. I guess I'm saying if the onus is always going to be on the installer anyway to prove that it's a catastrophic failure to get paid and to get all the paperwork in a row, what is preventing an installer from then saying, let's just replace the system. Let's have faith that we're doing the right thing here and that, the county and state will, recognize what we're, it's on us. It's on us to prove it. It's not on the county to prove it, so what's the onus and why aren't we able to, replace catastrophic failures right away when they happen?
Yeah, I agree that we want to replace them as soon as possible. Our current system is we want to make sure there's a grant in place before that's installed so that a homeowner isn't left with, a bill they weren't expecting. But we should look into if this, and it's been brought up before, is this an option that contractors and installers want to go towards, that if we need to, revise rules, regulations, or possibly the law to allow for that, let's look into that. We just don't want anyone to be an unfortunate event. A catastrophic failure in general is an unfortunate event, so we don't want to make it any worse, but let's look at all these examples and, see if that's something that we should look into changing.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean. And I know we're running up on time here. Julia, there's a couple more slides. You want to just pop those up real fast if you haven't already?
I give you Dorian Dale.
Yep, sure. I'm going to go through this quickly in the interest of time, and any follow-up that anybody on this call might have. It gets back to the countywide district, which I believe we've addressed with you before. It solves a number of very significant issues moving forward. First and foremost, the number of systems that are going beyond the third year, so the O&M is critical to maintain. We believe that a district is also useful in soliciting future federal infrastructure funding because of if we have the matching funds from a dedicated revenue stream, and it's been suggested that it be something on the order of $5 a month per house, which works out to a fairly nominal total per household over the course of the year, $60. Then we're in a position to receive the kind of support that the feds have been providing because we have the match in place. We're going to be looking at levelizing sewer rates. That doesn't really, I think, impact a lot of the folks on this call, but that is an issue because there is inequity in rate status in the various sewer districts. Finally, what does impact everybody on this call is the grant status. And we've made really Herculean efforts with IRS to really resolve this double taxation that was imposed owing to an ill-advised solicitation of an opinion from IRS by our county comptroller. As a result, you get $20,000 in tax in grants coming from the state and the county, and 14,000 of that conceivably or thereabouts is going down to the feds. It makes no sense. But if the county-wide districts is in place, it would be just like the sewer grants that are enabling sewer connections in the western portion of Suffolk right now. None of those homeowners are receiving 1099s. That's the same principle. And so we believe this will resolve that. I think that there are other values, including amortization, enhancement of property value. But critically moving forward, we are looking to get this as a part of the state legislation, and it's really a fairly straightforward process. We did have it within the governor's budget this past January. Unfortunately, a few of our representatives frankly dropped the ball in following through on it. But all it really does is tell the county, now you can vote on whether or not there can be a referendum to determine whether there will be a district. So the first step is the county legislature, the state legislation, the county legislature then follows up. And really all that does is set up a referendum, which ask the voters to say yay or nay to the district and the nominal, fee. It's called democracy, ladies and gentlemen. So let's please move this apace and be aware this is something we are going to try and engage as many of our representatives as possible. I think it's clearly in the interest of the industry. One of the issues that has come up, in our marketing program is the idea that you target really the more vulnerable areas, those homeowners that have older systems that are in higher groundwater. And the problem, of course, at this point is we really haven't been logging the information relative to these systems. You know, how many times has it been pumped out during the course of the year? We know that there are those who favor this. Certainly the Liquid Licensing Board operators are very keen on manifesting thoroughly, and this is clearly, if we're going to move forward, something that is going to have to be engaged. We're preparing ways in which to assist those who seem to be perhaps technically challenged to put this into our SHIP system, so that that's not no longer an obstacle. But you can't manage what you don't measure. And if you don't measure, you can't have the kind of outreach that will effectively really communicate the message of the importance of what we're doing and why this district and why this funding fee is important. I'll hand it back to Ken on that note.
Thanks, Dorian. All right, folks. So I know we're at the end here over a few minutes. Really appreciate everyone's time. I think this was a great discussion again. And again, the door is always open. If folks weren't comfortable providing their recommendations or observations today, again, definitely shoot any one of us, Julia, Jen, Matt, myself, an email, or pick up the phone, give us a call with any suggestions. So if you can, we're hoping for final suggestions and comments by July 8th, 2022. The door is always going to be open afterwards anyway, so don't be shy. But this would help us greatly in terms of enabling us to move forward with next steps. So our next meeting will be in this fall, and just some possible agenda items that we've already discussed today, but other things that are coming down the road here. Again, PSD evaluation update based on input received and discussions. We didn't really talk about PSD O&M today, so that's something else that we're going to reach out to the industry for, as well as the regional jurisdictions for any recommendations they have for enhancing PSD performance relative to O&M itself. We'll also have our draft standards out there to review for things that we can move forward with. Review our findings of the time dosing evaluation, the cost benefit evaluation that I mentioned before. We're going to talk more about additional industry training, specifically related to PSDs, but that could be expanded to IA systems as well to enhance our training program. And then another thing that we've been working on is trying to figure out a way to require system inspections upon property sale. This is something that happens throughout New York State. That is a consumer benefit. If somebody's selling their property, just like the engineering inspection that has to be done on the house, well, the sanitary system should be inspected as well. And it's a mechanism to protect the consumer, as well as to make sure potentially serve as a platform for upgrading that system to an IA system eventually. So this is something that we've been working on. Again, we'll talk about during the next meeting. It's important.
And pursuant to that point, it did transpire in yesterday's exchange with the Liquid Waste Board that they're looking at an endorsement 8, to specifically make this a requirement. And we have already a legislative ally in the county legislature with an R behind him, which means that's the majority, and that's critical. So this is, I think, a policy matter that we're going to be moving on maybe before we actually meet in the fall. So stay tuned. And also, I should add to this list, we'll be starting the full court press going into next year to really reach out to the state legislators to make sure they get this in, the final budget, and then work on the county legislatures moving into next November. So those are all issues that will be, I think, exceedingly well, informed and augmented by everybody's participation on this call.
Awesome. Thanks, Dorian. And then, yeah, I've mentioned before, hopefully this winter, based on all the input we've received and the outreach we've done and evaluations, we can finalize our standards and get the commissioner signatures and get them posted online. But really appreciate everyone's time. I know we've gone over a few minutes here. Everybody's so busy. Again, very fruitful discussion, and look forward to hopefully hearing additional comments. And if not, we'll talk to everybody again in the fall if we don't talk sooner.
Happy trails.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, guys.